listeners, host Grace Anna here. We will be releasing a 2-part episode on the famed tragic actress and muse Sarah Siddons later this month. In the meantime, we are re-releasing ArtMuse's episode on the performer, painter, artist model, and queen of Montparnasse, Alice Pren, better known as Kiki de Montparnasse. Kiki is perhaps best known for her relationship with Man Ray, whom she was romantically involved with for nearly a decade. During that time, she modeled for countless photographs by him, including some of his most recognizable images, such as Le Violon d'Angre and Noir et Blanche. But Kiki was far more than just Man Ray's muse. Kiki co-collaborated with Man Ray to create these images, using her expertise as a performer to bring his photographs to life. And Kiki modeled for numerous other leading artists in Paris, such as Modigliani, Suguharu Fujita, and Hayam Soutine. But what is lesser known about Kiki is that she was an artist in her own right. She was an accomplished expressionistic painter whose own work quickly sold out. She wrote and published her own memoir when she was only 27 years old, and she was the most popular performer in all of Montparnasse, whose raw and energetic cabaret performances captured the heart of bohemian Paris. But though she was one of the most famous women of her day, Kiki has unfortunately since largely faded into obscurity. In this episode, we aim to honor Kiki as the independent and free-spirited woman she was. A woman who was never afraid to live her life as she pleased and dance to the beat of her own drum. A woman who not only understood the power of her own image, but what it meant to take agency over it for herself. Though she modeled for countless artists, her participation was never passive. Instead, she imbued each of these works she posed for with her own creative force and visions. Kiki fits in nicely with this season's theme of artist models who were also performers in their own right. Since we are only re-releasing part 1 of Kiki's 2-part episode, be sure to go back into ArtMuse's catalog and listen to part 2. ArtMuse can be found anywhere you get your podcasts. I hope you enjoy. Today's episode will touch on sensitive topics, such as alcoholism and addiction. So if you are sensitive to this content, please listen at your own discretion. What is art without the muse? Many of Western art's most famous works are depictions of women. But who were these women? Do they have their own stories to share with the world? Hello and welcome to ArtMuse, a podcast that aims to reshape the ways in which we interpret well-known works of art by paying dues to the women whose images have been immortalized, but whose names and stories have been wrongfully overlooked. While these women's faces are familiar to viewers around the world, their identities have been largely forgotten. Together, we will explore the important lives and legacy of the female muse and appreciate these works of art from a new perspective, through the eyes of the women whose image stares back at us. Is the muse in actuality just as, if not more, important than the artists themselves? And I'm your host, Grace Anna. Dear listeners, before we begin, I want to clarify that in today's episode, I will be referring to Kiki de Montparnasse by her birth name, Alice Pren, as I describe her early life. Once she is given the nickname Kiki, I will refer to her as Kiki. This is to be as historically accurate as possible, as well as to adhere to how we believe Kiki would have referred to herself. She not only captured the hearts of the best artists of her day, but the essence of an entire era. From her boisterous personality to her sensuous performances, to her endlessly creative spirit, she came to embody one of the most vibrant places in one of the most decadent decades of modern history. Paris during the Roaring '20s, at the height of its jazz age. Listeners, today I introduce you to the model, performer, painter and memoirist Alice Prynne, better known as Kiki de Montparnasse. Kiki not only blossomed in, but helped define the bohemian subculture burgeoning in Paris in the 1920s. More specifically, Kiki moved amongst the circles of the Montparnasse district, the neighborhood in which some of the most famous artists of the 20th century, like Picasso and Modigliani, worked and lived. She was so beloved amongst her community that she was eventually crowned the Queen of Montparnasse and became a local celebrity. And Kiki was not only a social icon. Over her lifetime, she became one of the most prolific art models in the history of Western art, modeling for prominent artists such as Francis Picabia, Alexander Calder, and Man Ray, with whom she shared an 8-year heated relationship with. Born in Burgundy into immense poverty, Alice Prynne was raised by her grandmother alongside many of her cousins. At the age of 12, she was sent to join her mother in Paris, where she was expected to work as soon as she was of legal age. Through her early adolescence, Alice worked a number of menial jobs until the age of 17, when she got into a tussle with the baker she was working for and promptly punched him in the face. A final straw, Alice decided she wanted to seek an alternate life for herself. In 1917, she made her way to the up-and-coming area of Montparnasse, where she was approached by a sculptor who asked her to model for him. Homeless and with no money to her name, Alice happily jumped on the opportunity. And though she found the experience of posing in the nude daunting at first, she not only adjusted, but soon became exhilarated by it. She absolutely loved the world of artists, and it didn't take long for her to become one of the most popular models in the neighborhood, posing for Modigliani, Moise Kissling, and Maurice Menjiski, who famously gave Alice her nickname Kiki. And she was far more than just a model. She developed deep friendships with each of the artists she worked with and inspired some of their greatest works. But no artist was more inspired than the American surrealist photographer Man Ray. Kiki met Man Ray in Paris in the fall of 1921. The two became immediately enamored with one another, and soon after entered what would become an 8-year-long steamy affair. But far more than just his lover, Kiki became Man Ray's artistic obsession, and he took hundreds of portraits of her over their almost decade-long relationship. In fact, some of Man Ray's best-known photographs feature Kiki, including his famed Violon d'Angre and Noir et Blanche. Kiki played an integral role in the creation of each of these works, co-collaborating on them with Man Ray, despite receiving no official credit. She equally deserves recognition for her role in launching Man Ray's career. Without her artistic guidance and support, there is no question that Man Ray would not have become the surrealist photographer and filmmaker he is celebrated as today. But Kiki should not only be appreciated as Man Ray's muse. She was also an artist in her own right, and her creativity took many forms. Kiki was an accomplished painter, who, although having no formal training, had a sold-out solo exhibition in 1927 at the Galerie au Sacre du Printemps in Paris. Her paintings, which were largely pastoral landscapes, were incredibly inventive and burst with vibrant color and energy. Kiki was also a cabaret performer, whose signature act at the neighborhood's popular Jockey Club attracted locals and tourists alike. Her raspy voice and risque dance moves quickly turned her into a local celebrity, and she was one of the most renowned chanteuses of her day. As author Mark Broad described, Kiki's shows were imbued with the spirit of artistic experimentation. If a singing voice could smell, hers would be garlic hitting a pan's hot butter and wine. And perhaps most notably, in 1928, Kiki published her own autobiography titled Kiki's Souvenirs. The book consisted of 28 chapters retelling Kiki's life. The original French version included a preface written by the Japanese painter Suguharu Fujita, who not only painted Kiki, but considered her a close friend. And the English version, published the following year, included a preface written by Ernest Hemingway. Due to its racy content, Kiki's Souvenirs was actually banned in the United States until 1970. But this did not stop Kiki's book from garnering international fame. By 1929, at the peak of her stardom, Kiki was crowned Queen of Montparnasse, a title she certainly deserved, out of recognition of her integral role and immense influence within the artistic communities of the neighborhood. But sadly, Kiki's reign as queen faded along with the decade she thrived in. As the 1920s came to an end, Kiki slipped more and more out of popularity. Devastated over her fall from grace, she spent the last years of her life in the throes of alcohol and cocaine abuse. She was known to still perform for tourists, but as she aged, her acts became increasingly humiliating and degrading as she desperately tried to regain the public's attention. In March of 1953, Kiki collapsed on the street and passed away at the age of 51 from complications due to her alcohol and drug dependence. In today's episode, we ask, in the words of author Mark Broad, how did it happen that this young woman, born poor, obscure, and illegitimate, who in her brief life barely made enough to eat, by singing old songs for tips, posing for the art of others, selling sketches to fellow drinkers spied from her bar stool, how did it happen that this young woman should be the one to capture the spirit of her age like no one else, and by doing nothing more than making a performance of herself? Today we hope to not only answer Broad's insightful questions, but honor Kiki as the visionary and independent woman she was. A woman who inspired masterpieces by the greatest artists of her day, who painted with unrestrained expression and sang with bravado, whose memoir gained international recognition, and whose free spirit came to symbolize an entire era of European history. So without further ado, let's dive into the jazzy world of Alice Prynne, Kiki de Montparnasse. Alice Ernestine Prynne was born on October 2, 1901, in Châtillon-sur-Seine, a small village in Burgundy, France. She was born out of wedlock to a single mother named Marie Prynne. Marie was only 18 years old when she had Alice, and was working as a linotypist for a local newspaper at the time. Though a respectable job, Marie was considered to be of the lowest class and was living well below the poverty line. Alice's father was a man named Maxime Legros, a charcoal and wood merchant who had a shop just down the road from Marie. We can imagine that this is how Marie and Maxime first met. Maxime was 10 years older than Marie and from a better-off family. So when his parents heard of their relationship, they immediately disapproved. They not only refused to let Maxime marry Marie, but pressured him to marry another woman who they felt was more respectable. Unfortunately, despite how Maxime himself may have felt towards Marie, he followed his parents' orders, and the young and pregnant Marie was left unmarried and completely on her own. To add to the trying circumstances surrounding Alice's birth, Marie experienced a particularly difficult pregnancy. Alice later shared that when her mother went into labor with her, she fought so fiercely to be born that Marie was knocked to the ground in the middle of the street and had to be carried home. And when Alice was delivered a few hours later, Marie's umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck, turning her face purple. Luckily, as Alice later remarked, fortune dictated I'd be given a chance to live, and the cord was safely untangled from her neck. Always one to make a grand entrance, Alice's dramatic delivery only seems fitting. Alice was named after her aunt, who had tragically passed away at only 18 years old. Because Marie was unmarried, Alice was given her mother's last name. When Alice was still an infant, Marie arranged to go to Paris to find work as a nurse in a hospital. Alice was taken in by her grandmother, Genevieve Prynne, with the arrangement that Marie would send money back for Alice's care. At her grandmother's house, Alice was raised amongst her 5 cousins, who also had widowed or single mothers unable to look after them. Alice and her cousins were raised in extreme poverty. The family crammed into a small stone home, which was particularly cold through the winters. And for most of their meals, they had to line up at their local nunnery, where they were served a measly bowl of vegetable broth and rice. In drawings depicting her childhood that Alice made many years later, she showed herself as a scrawny young girl, anxiously waiting to be served by a mean-faced nun. As Alice recalled, it was a wretched childhood that could only lead to despair. But her knack for making the most out of difficult situations was apparent even in her early age, and Alice found ways to find happiness anywhere she could. She rejoiced when the nunnery served her favorite dish of baked red beans, and she enjoyed every bite of the bread soup she was served at kindergarten. Her 5 cousins, 3 boys and 2 girls became her playmates and companions, and she became particularly close to her cousin Madeleine. But her warmest memories all were of her grandmother Genevieve, who showered Alice and her cousins with unconditional love, and imbued in each of them her lust for life. Alice knew that her grandmother could very easily have given her and her cousins up to public assistance, but she worked extra jobs even at her elder age to keep the family together. Grandmother Genevieve left an indelible impact on the young Alice and taught her the importance of both perseverance and optimism early on. Alice was certainly a lively young girl. Her naturally mischievous nature made her especially popular at school. During lunchtime, she would climb the playground walls and walk on her tippy toes across its perimeter, over a nearly 10-foot drop below. Her classmates looked on in awe, and Alice quickly gained their respect. Unfortunately, she was not as popular with her teachers. Though she was clearly a bright student, Alice was constantly getting in trouble. As she later recalled, "The worst punishment the teacher found for me was to stand in a corner with my nose to the wall, and I used to stand like that for whole days." And despite the bravado she showed on the playground, Alice found it harder and harder to hide from her classmates just how poor she and her family were. Her ratty clothing and bony limbs made her stick out like a sore thumb, and she felt increasingly self-conscious. This was made worse by the fact that her teacher often found lice in Alice's hair, and her grandmother eventually had to cut her hair short to prevent further infestations. Fed up with getting in trouble and feeling embarrassed over her appearance, Alice decided to stop going to school by the age of 10. When her grandmother found out, she screamed and screamed, but in the end, her shouts were no match for Alice's strong will. Instead of going to school, Alice spent her days outdoors, picking wild mushrooms and berries. She was always scrounging for her next meal, and she spent a lot of her days looking for food scraps to eat. She would also spend time with her father. Unlike her cousins, Alice was the only one of the bunch whose father was still alive and lived locally. Alice later recalled that on many of these afternoons, she came across her father in his charcoal buggy, selling coal around town. His arrival was announced by a silver trumpet, which he blew loudly as he approached the village. Often her father would let Alice accompany him for the day, not only selling coal to customers, but going to the surrounding forest to make charcoal from bonfires. They often ended the day at a local pub, where Alice would sneak sips of Pernod from distracted patrons. On a few occasions when she indulged too much, Alice climbed atop the bar and sang old shanty songs to the drunk customers around her. But when Alice turned 12, her mother wrote to her grandmother requesting that Alice be sent to Paris. She wanted Alice to attend school there to improve her literacy, with the hopes that she could one day become a linotypist. Alice was devastated over the prospect of leaving her grandparents and cousins behind. Despite their poverty, she absolutely loved her life in the countryside and was terrified to leave. Ultimately, she had little choice in the matter, and she and her grandmother made their way towards the city. To get to Paris, Alice and her grandmother traveled by train to Troyes, where Alice would then have to continue on her journey alone. But as her grandmother tried to get Alice to board the train, Alice broke down in tears. In fact, she threw such a fit that the conductor decided to move her to first class in hopes that it would calm her down. Unfortunately, this only exasperated Alice's tantrum. As she sat down, she noticed the woman sitting across from her shriveled her nose in disgust over Alice's appearance and smell. Alice wished she could just disappear. She cried the entire train ride to Paris. As Alice stepped off the train onto Gare de l'Est in Paris, she would have been met by a cacophony of sounds: bells, whistles, shouts, and the clacking of horses' hooves from the street. How did she feel as she took her first few steps in Paris? Were her tears dried by a wave of excitement? Did the hustle and bustle of Parisian city life exhilarate her? Or was her heart still heavy over having to leave her beloved grandmother and life in the country behind? We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers. Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. Unfortunately, Alice's adjustment to Paris was not made easier by her mother. Alice had only known her mother in infancy, and she felt like a stranger to her. Unlike her grandmother, who showered Alice with affection, her mother instead remained cold and distant. When Alice moved into her mother's apartment, she was unpleasantly surprised to find that she would be sharing the space with her mother's latest lover, a man named Gaston, who ran the linotypist company her mother worked for. Her mother wasted no time in sending Alice to the school around the corner, despite Alice's protests. Worried that she might be ridiculed not only for her gaunt appearance, but also her grade school level education, Alice reluctantly obliged. But to her surprise, Alice found that she actually really enjoyed school. She especially loved her history lessons, transfixed by stories of Napoleon and the French Revolution. She also discovered her joy for reading, a hobby she would return to for the rest of her life. Sadly, Alice's days at school were short-lived. As soon as she turned the legal working age of 13, her mother pulled her out of school to find work. Over the course of the next few years, Alice worked a number of minimum wage jobs across Paris. She worked as a bottle cleaner, a shoe shiner, and as a bookbinder's apprentice, to name a few. Most of these jobs only paid a measly 15 cents a week, which her mother collected from Alice. Even with Alice's additional income, she and her mother hovered just over the poverty line. But channeling her grandmother's zest for life, Alice still managed to make the best of her otherwise depressing situation. She always managed to find little ways to have fun. In her memoirs, Alice recalled how she and her girlfriends from the neighborhood put oil in their hair for curls and rouged their cheeks with artificial geranium flowers. She also admitted to lying about her age and sneaking off to the movies with boys. Perhaps tired of Alice's antics, or simply no longer wanting the responsibility of housing her. In 1916, her mother decided to send Alice to apprentice with the baker, who gave her room and board in exchange for work. It was here, in her little room, that Alice first began to notice the lively nightlife of Paris. As she lay in bed to fall asleep, she could hear men whistling after women, and began to imagine her own love story. She became eager to meet more people her age and join in on their fun. Though the last few years had certainly been challenging, Alice began to get this intuitive feeling that her life was about to change and that her big break was just around the corner. This made the grueling job as baker's assistant all the more trying. As Alice later described of her time at the bakery, "My job was to keep a big iron bar going to let the flour down into the strainer. I'd come out white as a mouse. Then I'd have to help the baker take the bread out of the oven. This baker used to strip naked and make dirty jokes for my benefit." Not only was her job extremely laborious, but she was victim to constant sexual harassment from her boss. After a few months, Alice hit a breaking point. One day when she walked into the bakery and the baker called her a little tart, Alice punched him across the face, knocking him off his feet. Without looking back, Alice stormed out of the bakery, never to return again. Though certainly an empowering moment, leaving her job at the bakery also unfortunately meant forgoing her housing, and Alice knew that she would have to find new work soon. She wandered around the city from neighborhood to neighborhood as she contemplated what kind of life she wanted to make for herself. And it just so happened that the answer she was looking for presented itself to her in the form of an odd proposition. As Alice meandered the streets of Paris, an older man in a black beret approached her. He introduced himself as a sculptor and asked Alice if she would pose for him. Though she never before would have imagined herself posing for an artist, she knew that she needed to find work and decided to follow the mysterious man back to his studio. But soon after arriving, Alice realized that the sculptor expected her to take off her clothes and that she would have to pose in the nude. At only 16 years old, she was terrified at the thought of being naked in front of a man. As Alice later remembered, "I was shivering as much from fear as from the cold." Luckily, Alice did not find the sculptor to be particularly intimidating. He was older and quite plump and gave her a reassuring nod that she would be safe in his presence. And as the sculptor began his work, Alice found that she actually enjoyed the experience of posing. All she had to do was breathe and be as still as possible, a far less arduous task than the menial jobs that she had worked over the last few years. And she was also pleasantly surprised by the pay. When she finished her first 3-hour session, Alice was paid as much as she had made in an entire week working at the bakery. She began to pose for the sculptor regularly, coming in for sessions 3 times a week. Alice counted her blessings that she had found a job that not only paid well, but that she actually enjoyed. But unfortunately, when her mother caught word that Alice was posing in the nude for an artist, she was far less enthused. As Alice later retold, "Folks told my mother that her daughter was undressing in a man's room. My mother forced her way into the sculptor's studio and screamed that I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was a dirty whore. As her mother stormed out of the studio, she let Alice know that she was disowning her for good. How did Alice feel to be disowned by her own mother? Did she suddenly think that modeling was a big mistake? Or did her mother's hateful reaction solidify her choice to make a new life for herself? We can imagine that her mother's cutting words made Alice feel far more naked than all the times that she had posed in the nude. Despite her mother's outburst, Alice continued to model for the sculptor. It was not only a way for Alice to make money, it was also her first real introduction into the art world, a world she found exhilarating. The sculptor's studio was in a building called the Impasse Ronson, which housed many other artist studios, including the Romanian sculptor Brancusi. Alice found the artistic community fascinating and was eager to be introduced to other artists. When she wasn't posing for the sculptor, she would often go around and knock on different studio doors, hoping to find work with other artists in the vicinity. Seeking better opportunities, Alice eventually made her way to a neighborhood called Montparnasse, which was quickly becoming a hub for young and rising artists. Artists were attracted to Montparnasse for a few reasons. To start, it was very close to Paris's prestigious art school, the Académie Beaux-Arts. It also offered large workspaces for relatively low rent. Pablo Picasso moved to Montparnasse in 1912, followed by other famed creatives like Marcel Duchamp and Jean Cocteau. Artists began referring to Montparnasse as the Quarter, and it became not only an artistic hub, but a safe haven where eccentrics could break societal rules and express themselves freely. As Marc Brod eloquently wrote, people who had been shunned as outsiders in most other places felt free there to conduct themselves as they wanted. Montparnasse was global in its makeup and progressive in its outlook. Across Montparnasse, cafes became meeting points for artists, writers, and creatives alike to gather and engage in intellectual discourse. There was one cafe in particular that became a favorite amongst the neighborhood's artists, Café de la Rotonde. And in the back of the cafe was a room where artists were known to go and seek out models for their work. When Alice first came across Café de la Rotonde, she saw successful artist after successful artist walk towards the back, and she knew that she had found her golden ticket into the art world. The only problem was, not everyone was allowed into the back room. It was safeguarded by the cafe's owner, a large man named Le Bayan, who patrons jokingly nicknamed Papa. Unfortunately, Alice did not initially pass Papa's test. Dressed in shabby clothes and an even shabbier hat, Alice was forced to sit in the front of the bar. As Alice later quipped, "I would have put my ass on my head to get into that room." Confined to the front, Alice spent her days watching various big-shot artists, writers, and actors pass her by as they made their way to the exclusive back room. She wondered what they all might be doing back there and conjured up different theories. When she wasn't plotting her next attempt to be allowed in the back, Alice would pick someone out from the bar and start to sketch them. Most of her subjects were soldiers fighting in the Great War or tourists who were also confined to the front area like her. Clearly unnatural, her sketches were so impressive that she managed to sell them to pleasantly surprised customers. As Alice later, rather humbly, joked, "I'm not a great artist, but I know how to keep track of how much wine someone's had and how much they've been spending on cigarettes. The portraits may not have been spitting images, but they were easy to do, and I pocketed 10 cents for each one." We should perhaps credit these long afternoons as jump-starting Alice's own artistic career. Fed up with Papa's despotic rule over the Café de la Rotonde, Alice became determined to get into the back room whether he liked it or not. Since he had previously criticized her appearance, she found lace fabric in a nearby dumpster and sewed herself a new shirt. She even fashioned a new hat out of tinsel, which did make her look like a Christmas tree when she wore it on her head. Whether he was impressed by Alice's efforts or exhausted by her undeterred determination, Papa finally allowed Alice to go into the back room. We can only imagine the rush of endorphins she felt as she waltzed her way towards the back, smirking with victory. Thanks to her gregariousness and bold humor, it didn't take long for Alice to catch the attention of the men around her, and she began to befriend many of the artists. As Alice later described, "To be able to enter the rotonde, I was ready to march in on my head. I had found my true milieu. The painters adopted me, end of sadness. I still often went hungry, but the good fun made me forget all that. When you went into the rotonde, it was like coming home. You were with your family." And it was at the rotonde that Alice met her first great love, the Polish painter Maurice, originally Moisha, Menjiski. In late 1918, Alice had just recovered from the rampant Spanish flu and was feeling particularly lonely in its aftermath. As she returned to the social scene at the rotonde, she caught the attention of Maurice Menjiski, a Polish-Jewish painter and musician who had come to Paris over a decade earlier to study at the École des Beaux-Arts. Though he was 28 and she only 17, Alice was drawn to Menjiski's sparkling eyes and enigmatic personality. She also greatly admired his paintings, which Alice felt were even better than the work of the famed painter Cézanne. He loved Alice's natural zest for life and unabating determination, and he began to call her Kiki as a term of endearment, a nickname that Kiki continued to use for the rest of her life. But most of all, the more time Kiki spent with Menjiski, the safer and more secure she felt in his presence. She never imagined that she could have a relationship as fruitful and healthy as she had with Menjiski. It didn't take long for Kiki and Menjiski to fall in love, and she eventually moved into Menjiski's apartment with him in the early months of 1919. Living together, Kiki was not only Menjiski's loving partner, but she also became his personal model. Over their 4-year-long relationship, Kiki posed for Menjiski on countless occasions, though today only 5 of these portraits survive. In one, titled Kiki, painted in 1921, we see Kiki sitting on a chair as she cradles an apple in her palm. She is garbed in a chic green dress, with a green bowler hat to match. As she slouches in her chair, the sleeve of her dress falls seductively down her shoulder, which, like the apple, reminds us that Kiki is there to tempt us. Her dark eyes, bright red lips, and elongated neck all add to her appeal. In fact, her neck was so long that many artists playfully referred to her as Gazelle. Her nonplussed expression gives Kiki a cooler-than-cool attitude, and she is clearly not amused or intimidated by our presence. Though barely 20 years old, Kiki has the confidence of someone who has had a lifetime of experiences. In another painting titled Kiki, made in the same year, we see a more overtly sexual side of her. Here, Kiki is posed fully in the nude, as she lies upon a bed and seductively stretches her body, as if she is just waking up from a nap. Her supple breasts are accentuated, as are the curves of her womanly hips and thighs. Her eyes remain closed, and her cheeks are still flushed from the warmth of the blanket that she has just slipped off her body. Her face looks so peaceful that we aren't sure if Kiki has fully woken yet, almost as if she is caught between the dream world and the real world. As inviting as her voluptuous body seems, Kiki's cool detachment reminds us that this moment is for Kiki and Kiki alone. and we are lucky enough to catch a glimpse of her self-indulgence. Kiki and Menjiski remained together over the course of 4 years. Throughout her life, Kiki always fondly referred to Menjiski as her first true love. And Menjiski not only showed Kiki the ropes of romantic relationships, he also became her gateway to other prominent artists. It was through Menjiski that Kiki first met another Polish-born Jewish painter, Moise Kissling. Kissling was born in Krakow and grew up in the city's Jewish ghetto. He immigrated to Paris in 1910, hoping to study at the Académie Beaux-Arts. But speaking no French and having no money to fund his studies, he instead turned to Paris's bohemian circles to continue his education. He eventually fell into the artistic crowd at the Rotonde, where he was introduced to Kiki. Kissling was immediately drawn to Kiki's lively spirit and asked if he could book her to pose for him exclusively for a period of 3 months. This wasn't an unusual ask for Kissling. Known to be particularly possessive of his models, Kissling often hired models for weeks at a time so that they would be available to him at all hours of the day. Though Kiki had had a fair amount of modeling experience, she later admitted that she was still an amateur at this time. During her sessions with Kissling, she often burst into laughter mid-pose or broke her pose early so that she could help herself to Kissling's large array of snacks. Preferring to prance around his studio barefoot than stand still, she certainly made it difficult for Kissling to capture her on canvas. But Kissling barely minded. An equally humorous man, he often joined Kiki in laughter. He particularly enjoyed when Kiki would imitate different opera singers for him, and sometimes they even had competitions over who could produce a louder fart. Kiki and Kissling were not only sibling-like in nature, but the more time they spent together, the more they started to look like one another too. Styling their black hair in almost identical bob cuts, with long bangs down to their eyebrows, Kiki and Kissling fooled many, pretending to be brother and sister. Despite their antics, Kissling did manage to paint a portrait of Kiki in 1920. Looking at the portrait, one would have no idea that Kiki and Kissling spent most of their time laughing with one another. Here, Kiki sits hunched over, with her chin resting on her hand. She has a serious and somber expression, giving the portrait a melancholic air. Her eyes, which Kissling enlarges, look as if they might burst into tears, and they glisten with palpable sadness. Though Kissling did tend to paint his subjects in a gloomy and sinister style, we have to wonder if here he shows a different side to Kiki, an internal sadness that was brewing behind her comical facade. Nonetheless, there is no denying that Kissling saw in Kiki something very special, and he greatly admired her magnetic personality. Kissling would continue to paint Kiki over the course of their long friendship. Kiki also became friendly with the painter Chaim Sotin during this time. Sotin, another Jewish painter from Belarusian origins, was one of the most talented artists of his day. Though never romantically involved, Kiki and Sotin developed an extremely close bond, and she would stay with Sotin anytime she needed space from Menjiski. Kiki helped the introverted Sotin break out of his shell and often accompanied him to parties. At night, they liked to wander the streets together, arm in arm, as they explored Paris's demi-monde. Though Sotin certainly painted portraits of Kiki, unfortunately, none survive today. But a portrait by Polish artist Gustaw Głodowski, painted in 1920, has survived the test of time. Kiki and Głodowski first became acquainted through the crowd at the Rotonde. Though the two did not develop as close a bond as Kiki did with other artists, his portrait of her is one of the better known of her many portraits from this time. Titled Kiki de Montparnasse, Głodowski gives an up-close and intimate look at Kiki's beautiful face. Her delicate red lips are accentuated, as is her creamy skin and Romanesque nose. Here Kiki looks down, averting our gaze, emphasizing her green eyeshadow that she's caked onto her eyelids. Her hair follows the curves of her eyebrows, highlighting her heart-shaped face. Like a modern-day Greek goddess, Kiki is both of her time and timeless, and remains an ethereal enchantress today. Another artist that Kiki befriended during this time was the Italian painter Amedeo Modigliani. Modigliani frequented the Rotonde and became an integral part of its social circle. Kiki particularly enjoyed watching Modigliani at the cafe, joking that he'd eat with one hand while drawing with the other. She also loved going out with him at night because he was one of the few people who could keep up with her voracious drinking habits and disregard for sleep. It is widely believed that Kiki is the subject of one of Modigliani's portraits from 1919, though historians are unable to confirm her identity with certainty. The sitter certainly resembles Kiki, with her jet black hair styled in her famous bob and bangs, long and elegant neck, and bright red lips. It's no wonder that all these artists were drawn to Kiki. She had the ideal model's body, both chiseled and curved in all the right places. Her short bobbed hair, heavy makeup, and tomboy style gave her an edge that made her stand out amongst the other young women of Montparnasse. And she had a scrappy personality to match. Kiki was known to often say, "All I need is an onion, a bit of bread, and a bottle of red wine, and I'll always find someone to give me that." But most of all, she had a rare magnetism that attracted people to her with inexplicable force. Wherever she went, all eyes were on Kiki, and she soaked up all the attention. As the female painter Irene Zerkinden described, Kiki was vibrant, healthy, warm, and sexy. She had skin like light. Kiki was the sun that glowed. But soon, Kiki would meet the artist who would completely sweep her off her feet. And she'd become not only his muse, but also his co-collaborator, helping him launch his career as the artist he is revered as today. We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers. Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. In the winter of 1921, Kiki was introduced to the American photographer Man Ray through a mutual friend. He had just arrived in Paris a few months before and barely spoke any French. Though Kiki's knowledge of English was just as limited, and she likely understood very little of what he said, she found the way Man Ray spoke out of the side of his mouth, as if he were a detective, extremely endearing, and she took an immediate liking to him. Man Ray, who also struggled to keep up with Kiki's commentary, was struck by Kiki's natural elegance and observed, in his own words, that she moved as gracefully as a gazelle. Before the end of the night, Man Ray asked Kiki if she would model for him, but she refused his request, fearing that photographs were too realistic and exposed one's flaws. Man Ray assured her, in his broken French, that he could manipulate images with his camera. As he explained to her, "Light can do everything. Shadows work for me. I make shadows. I make light. I can create anything with my camera." When they said goodbye, Kiki reluctantly agreed to meet him at a studio in a few weeks' time. She smiled to herself and nearly skipped all the way home, as the warm feeling of infatuation filled her entire body. When she got home, she excitedly wrote to her friend, "I've met an American who makes pretty photographs. I'm going to pose for him. He has an accent I like and a little air of mystery about him." A few weeks later, Kiki arrived at Man Ray's hotel room to have her portrait taken. Though by now she was a seasoned model, she was nervous to be photographed and found herself shaking with fear. As Man Ray set up a backdrop, he asked Kiki to take off her clothes, and she began to pose in various positions. Perhaps due to her nerves or her developing crush on Man Ray, these early photographs were stilted and awkward. Man Ray eventually suggested that they scratch the session and get dinner together instead. As they dined at one of Kiki's favorite neighborhood spots, they looked into each other's eyes and shared their full life stories, or as well as they could with their language barrier. But there are some things that transcend language, and both Kiki and Man Ray could feel a growing force drawing them to one another, until they were each overcome with passion. After dinner, they made plans for another portrait session. But when Kiki arrived at the studio, they could no longer restrain themselves, and Man Ray's hands were too busy doing other things to take any photos. Not long after, Kiki officially became Man Ray's lover. Though she was still technically living with Menjiski, Kiki found it harder and harder to spend time away from Man Ray. When Menjiski traveled to the south of France for work that December, Kiki took the opportunity to quietly leave him and move in with Man Ray in his room at the Grand Hotel École, a cheap hotel popular with artists due to its close vicinity to the academy. But more importantly, it was just a few feet away from the Rotonde, and Kiki was thrilled to take Man Ray around and introduce him to the other artists of Montparnasse. Kiki was smitten, and she wanted to scream off the rooftops about her new love. In a letter to a friend, Kiki gives a rare, intimate glimpse of her early life with Man Ray. As she wrote, "He photographs folks in the hotel room where we live, and at night, I lie stretched out on the bed while he works in the dark. I can see his face over the little red light, and he looks like the devil himself. I am so on pins and needles that I can't wait for him to get through." And Kiki did a lot more than just watch Man Ray in his darkroom. Despite her early awkwardness, she quickly became his primary model. And even though he photographed big names like Jean Cocteau and Gertrude Stein, it was Kiki who he returned to again and again. Kiki not only had the innovation to pose in unique ways, she also had the patience to sit and wait while Man Ray played around with different techniques. Though the photographs taken in their first year of being together are not nearly as impressive as the masterpieces of their later years, you can see Man Ray and Kiki's early experimentation. In one, taken in 1922, we see Kiki seated on a chair, wearing an elaborate lace headdress. Her body is twisted elegantly as she looks over her shoulder. There is an interplay between Kiki's own limbs, the curve of the chair she sits on, and the shadows behind her. In another, taken the same year, we see one of the many photographs in which Kiki is captured fully in the nude. Here, Kiki seductively holds a silk cloth against her hips as she turns her face upwards, showing off her bright red lips and quizzical eyebrows. She maintains direct eye contact with the viewer, as if she is daring us to move closer. Set against a black backdrop, Kiki starts to blend in with her surroundings, until it's nearly impossible to differentiate her jet black hair with the sheet behind her. In this photo, Kiki stands like a sexy creature of the night, powerful and autonomous, just as ready to show us a good time as she is to break us in two. Though Kiki and Man Ray were still figuring out their collaborative photographic voice, there is no doubt that very early on, Man Ray saw in Kiki an unusual gift for performance, and he must have considered himself very lucky to be able to photograph her so frequently. Like Alfred Stieglitz, who photographed his wife Georgia O'Keeffe hundreds of times, Man Ray, similarly and almost systematically, sought to document Kiki and all of her complexities, capturing each one of her many moods and every facet of her personality. As smitten as they were, Kiki felt like she needed a break from city life, and in March of 1922, she headed down to Châtillon-sur-Seine to visit her beloved grandmother. Though she had found her circle in Paris, Kiki often missed the fresh air and quietude of the countryside. She would periodically spend a few weeks at her grandmother's house, sleeping in her old bed and enjoying her grandmother's cooking. But as restored as she felt under Grandmother Prin's roof, she began to miss Man Ray with her entire being. In a surviving letter from this time, Kiki gushed to Man Ray, "I love you too much. To love you less, I'd have to be around you more. And that would be good, because you're not made to be loved. You're too calm. I have to beg you for a caress, for a little bit of love sometimes. But I have to take you as you are. I bite your mouth until it bleeds and get drunk off your cool, mean stare." The letter not only speaks to Kiki's overwhelming passion for Man Ray, but points to his complex relationship with intimacy, an issue that would eventually break them many years later. When Kiki returned to Paris, she rushed to Man Ray's studio, only to find that he had gone out. Finding herself alone in his studio for the very first time, she picked up some watercolors and began to sketch. Fresh from the countryside, Kiki made drawing after drawing of pastoral scenes from her childhood. When Man Ray returned, Kiki put the drawings aside, not thinking too much of them. But when a few weeks later the art dealer, Henri Pierre Rocha, came to see Man Ray's work, he noticed Kiki's sketches and immediately asked to purchase 2 of them. He was incredibly impressed by her vivacious style and use of color, and felt that she had real talent as an artist. Though he had come to purchase Man Ray's work, instead, he left with Kiki's drawings tucked under his arm. How did Kiki feel about selling her first work of art? Was she surprised that such an important dealer had taken interest in her? Was she worried that she had overshadowed Man Ray's own work? Or was she thrilled that she was getting recognition as an artist in her own right? That summer, Man Ray rented a larger apartment for him and Kiki, with a private bathroom, balcony, and heat and electricity. Kiki excitedly decorated the apartment with flea market finds, a large Persian rug, an old gramophone, and rickety dining room chairs. She fell into a daily routine she affectionately called her little life, taking charge of not only their domestic affairs, but also managing Man Ray's growing career. It was Kiki who organized his schedule and made his appointments. She answered calls, and she helped translate between Man Ray and French clients. In fact, she helped Man Ray so much with his poor French that their friend jokingly called Kiki Man Ray's bedside dictionary. Kiki also prepared their meals and had a talent for creating flavorful dishes, which were, of course, always paired with wine or brandy. She loved to host their friends at their apartment and would famously serenade their guests after the meal. With perfect pitch and a natural instinct for performance, Kiki would blow their guests away with her own renditions of classic French folk songs. Though well before her performing days, Kiki clearly showed signs of her talents as a chanteuse. While Kiki ran their household and helped manage his career, Man Ray played his own rather peculiar role in their relationship. He was in charge of Kiki's makeup. Man Ray became near obsessed with evolving Kiki's look. Before they went out at night, Man Ray spent hours painting Kiki's face. As Kay Boyle, an American novelist living in Paris at the time, later remembered, Man Ray had designed Kiki's face for her and painted it on with his own hand. He would begin by shaving her eyebrows off and then putting other eyebrows back in any color he might have selected for her mask that day. Her heavy eyelids might be done in copper one day and in royal blue another, or else in silver or jade. And, in author Mark Broad's words, Man Ray meticulously applied her cosmetics and assisted in the choice of her clothes, creating a visual style that is as much a part of his oeuvre as any of his signed paintings. Kiki evidently became Man Ray's blank canvas, and each night she was transformed into one of his creations. It was around this time that Kiki first became acquainted with the French dancer Thérèse Moore, who would become her lifelong closest companion. On Bastille Day in 1922, Kiki noticed a beautiful dancer doing the new and trendy foxtrot at the Café Rotonde. She was immediately intrigued by not only Thérèse's moves, but her entire aura. And as they got to talking, Kiki was blown away to find that they had much in common. They both loved tarot and spiritualism. They both had a natural knack for performance, and most astonishingly, they both lived on the very same street. They spent nearly every day of the rest of that summer together, reading tarot and helping each other get ready for evenings out. When he allowed it, Thérèse took over Man Ray's role as Kiki's personal makeup artist, and she would take on more than just Kiki's makeup. When Man Ray traveled and left Kiki behind, Thérèse would sleep in Kiki's bed with her, knowing that Kiki was afraid to sleep alone. Soon Kiki and Thérèse became inseparable. They began to dress in similar outfits, and each found little mice to keep as pets. Kiki's white and Thérèse's black, bringing them around to different cafes in matching tiny baskets. As Kiki wrote of their friendship, "Thérèse and I, we are just like one. If either of us gives or gets anything, even a punch in the nose, we share it." That same year, Kiki made another lifelong companion, the Japanese painter and social eccentric Suguharu Fujita. Fujita was born in Tokyo into a noble samurai family and came to Paris with his wife in 1913 to pursue an art education. Unlike his European peers, Fujita began to combine traditional Japanese technique with modern Parisian aesthetics, and his unique style captured the attention of some of the biggest artists of Paris, like Picasso and Modigliani. By the time Kiki met Fujita in 1922, he was already an established artist within the circles of Montparnasse. So when he asked Kiki to pose for him, she jumped on the opportunity. But during her first modeling session, Kiki was so busy gallivanting around Fujita's studio that he wasn't able to get any painting done at all. And in an almost comical twist of fate, she actually painted his portrait before he could paint hers. In Fujita's own words, "Kiki took my place at the easel, told me not to move, and calmly began to draw my portrait. When she finished, she had sucked on and bitten all of my pencils and lost my eraser. She danced, sang, and walked all over my box of camembert." Though more of a friend than a reliable model, Kiki was eventually captured on canvas by Fujita later that year. Titled "Reclining Nude with Toit de Joie," Fujita depicts Kiki lying horizontally across a daybed covered in scrunched-up sheets. She props her head up with her hand, showing off her jet-black underarm hair, which matches her equally stark pubic hair. In conversation with Titian's Venus of Urbino and Manet's Olympia, Kiki is shown fully in the nude and confronts the viewer head-on with a direct stare. She is unafraid of her nudity and unabashedly lies in front of us like a goddess of the night. The line is thin between Kiki tempting and taunting us, and we are unsure whether to approach her or move back. Fujita's Japanese influence is evident. Kiki's olive skin tone has been transformed to a snow white. Her amber eyes have turned black, and her hair is delicately pulled back behind her face. Here, Fujita has placed Kiki in an alcove, surrounded by decorative drapes, which depict various stories about Venus, adding to the painting's sensuous nature. Though the painting was done by Fujita's hand, he always credited Kiki for her co-collaboration, saying that he could not say for sure who among the two of us was its author. Kiki's portrait was shown at that year's salon, where it was such a success that it sold instantly for 8,000 francs, a significant price for the time. Acknowledging that Kiki played an active role in the work's creation, Fujita shared a portion of the sale with her. Kiki was thrilled that the painting was such a success. Its widespread appeal not only propelled Fujita's career as a painter, but also Kiki's fame as an artist model. With her modeling career skyrocketing, Kiki was also ready to take the next step in her relationship with Man Ray. After 2 years of being together, Kiki was finally ready to tell Man Ray that she loved him. But when she confessed the depth of her feelings for him, he coldly replied, "Love? What's that? Huh, idiot? We don't love, we screw." Devastated by his response, Kiki impulsively decided to sail to New York with a handsome young American journalist named Mike. We do not know exactly how Kiki met Mike, but she couldn't have known him long before deciding to travel to America with him. For Kiki, it didn't matter. Mike offered an adventure that would help her forget Man Ray and his commitment issues. As Kiki's close friend Therese later described, Man Ray would brush her off when she said she loved him. She suffered when he wouldn't say he loved her in words. He loved her also, but he didn't have a good character. He didn't understand. When Kiki took off for New York, she left Man Ray behind a short note, stating simply, "I leave because you don't love me." Mike was the perfect distraction for Kiki. Not only was he taking her to New York, but in Kiki's own words, he was handsome and a good lover. It was a marvelous sexual encounter. Unfortunately, the trip to New York was not the glamorous experience Kiki was hoping for. Soon into the voyage, Kiki realized that she had severe seasickness and a deep fear of open water. Every time the ship creaked or hit rougher currents, Kiki felt like she was having a panic attack. To ease her anxiety, she incessantly drank champagne, but because she often drank on an empty stomach, this only made her seasickness worse. As she fought back both tears and vomit, Kiki missed Man Ray and her friends in Montparnasse more than ever, and began to regret her impulsive leave. But when she arrived in New York City, all of that worry and fear quickly abated. Upon arrival, Mike took her to the Hotel Lafayette, right off the famous Washington Square Park. Kiki instantly fell in love with New York's bustling energy, and she and Mike spent much of their time drinking their way through the city's speakeasies. Because America was in the throes of prohibition, they had to drink alcohol out of teacups, which Kiki found amusing. When a few weeks later her love affair with Mike fizzled out and he went back to his home in St. Louis, Kiki decided to remain in New York on her own. She ended up spending 3 months exploring the city completely by herself. Many days she liked to walk in a random direction, with no specific destination in mind, to see where fate might take her. She also loved going to the cinema, which she went to every single afternoon during her stay. She greatly admired New Yorkers' tolerant attitude, appreciating how they left people alone to do what they liked without judgment. And for Kiki, untethered by responsibility, social obligations, and men, in New York she was able to live as freely as she wanted. In Mark Broad's words, Kiki's time in New York was her own assertion of independence. But by the fall of 1923, Kiki was ready to return to Paris. Though she had stayed out of contact with him for a few months, Kiki wrote to Man Ray asking for money for her return. Her time in New York had given her a newfound confidence in herself and a desire to live a life authentic to her own spirit. She would return to Montparnasse a changed woman, and she was ready to shake up the art world and achieve the success that she had always dreamed of. I hope you have enjoyed part 1 of our 2-part episode on Alice Prynne, better known as Kiki de Montparnasse. We will finish Kiki's story and honor her immense legacy in part 2 of this episode. I have included images, resources, and suggestions for further reading on the ArtMuse website and Instagram. ArtMuse is produced by Kula Production Company. Today's episode was written by me, your host, Grace Anna. Stay tuned as I continue to share the stories of the women behind some of the world's most important works of art. Until next time, bye for now.